Good day. My name is Clark Dominic Piragadi, and for this presentation, we're going to talk about Gauss's law. So, in our previous discussion, we already explored the nature of charges, including the use of Coulomb's law in calculating for electric force and electric field due to point charges. But when it comes to complex charge distribution, so the use of Coulomb's law can be quite limiting and it's quite impractical especially on the mathematical side. That is why, for simplification, we usually use Gauss's law. Now, let's start this presentation by talking about our learning points. So first, we're going to understand the concept of electric flux. Next, apply Gauss's law to calculate electric fields. Third, we're going to explore the behavior of charges on conductors. And fourth, we're going to delve into the applications of Gauss's law. So let's start with electric flux. By definition, electric flux is the rate of flow of the electric field through a given area. Electric flux is proportional to the number of electric field lines going through a virtual surface. So we can actually compare electric flux with our fluid flow rate. So to recall, our fluid flow rate is equivalent to the product of the velocity times its area. So the velocity of the fluid multiplied by the area in which it is flowing. Now, if you're going to, instead of having these streamlines as the velocity vector of the fluid, we can say that this one is the electric field lines. And each of these electric field lines are flowing through these imaginary areas here. So I have two imaginary areas. The first one is perpendicular to the electric field line, and then the other one is quite slanted through across the electric field lines. If you could observe, the more perpendicular the area to the electric field line is, the more number of electric field lines flow through this imaginary area. Therefore, we can get the most electric flux when our surface is actually perpendicular to the electric field. So with that, we can have the electric flux symbolized by P sub E through the surface equals to the scalar product or the dot product of the electric field and the area vector A. So since we are dealing with dot products or scalar products, it means that we are only up to the component of the electric field that is parallel to the area vector and perpendicular to the surface. So we can only get electric flux if there's a component to the electric field that is parallel to the area vector. And also, area vector is always perpendicular to our surface. That is why the component of the electric field that we want is parallel to the surface since it is always normal to the area vector. And with that, when doing the dot product between the two vectors, electric field and the area vector, we could actually arrive with this formula EA cosine P, where E is the magnitude of the electric field, A is the area, and P is the angle between the electric field and the area vector. Again, P is the angle between the electric field and area vector. By the way, our electric flux is a scalar quantity, meaning it has no direction, only the magnitude. And by the way, electric flux has the unit as a unit voltmeter or Newton meter squared per coulomb. And again, I repeat, the phi in our formula represents the angle between the area vector and then the electric field. If and when a problem states an angle is given as from the surface going to the electric field, let's say that's theta. So we can actually calculate for P by subtracting theta from 90. Okay, since the surface is perpendicular to the area vector, so we can get P as the difference between 90 and the angle between our surface and our electric field. So we have three cases here. So if the angle between our electric field and our area vector is less than 90 degrees, but more than 0, so we can actually get this formula as mentioned earlier. So we have EA cosine P. And when our electric field is parallel to our area vector, meaning the angle is equal to 0, so we can simplify our formula to just the product of the magnitude of electric field and the area. So that's EA. Since cosine 0 is equal to 1. Okay? And if the angle between the electric field and then the area vector is equal to 90 degrees, or meaning they are perpendicular, we can also we can say that the flux through the surface is equal to 0 because cosine 90 is equal to 0. Okay? So next, let's try to answer sample problem number 1. So a flat sheet is in a shape of a rectangle with sides length 0.4 meters and 0.6 meters. So the sheet is immersed in a uniform electric field of magnitude 76 Newton per coulomb. So that is directed 20 degrees from the plane of the sheet. Find the magnitude of the electric flux through the sheet. So we are given here with a sheet whose side lengths are 0.6 meters and 0.4 meters. And we have here the area vector. So again, our area vector is always perpendicular to the surface. And since this angle here is 20 degrees, so that's between the surface and then the electric field, we can also say that this angle here is also 20 degrees, making the angle between the area vector and electric field equal to 70 degrees. So with that, we can now solve for the magnitude of the electric flux through the sheet. So given the formula, dot product of the electric field and then the area vector, or equal to AA cosine P. So and since our surface is a rectangle, we can rewrite our area as the product of the length and the width. So we have here the final formula for the electric flux for this problem. So plugging in the values for E, that's 76 Newton per coulomb, for length, that is 0.6, point 4, that is 0, point width, that is 0.4, and for the P, that is 70, giving us the flux equal to 6.2384 volt meter. So that would be our answer for this problem. Now let's try to answer practice problem 22.6. So the cube in the figure has 6 sides of length equal to 10 centimeters. The electric field is uniform, has magnitude E equals to 4 times 10 to the power 3 Newton per coulomb, and is parallel to the xy plane at an angle of 53.1 measured from the x-axis toward the y-axis. So what is the electric flux through each of these 6 cube faces? S1 equals to S1, S2, S3, S4, S5, and S6. What is the total electric flux through all the faces of the cube? Now let's start by looking at the given. So earlier we were given with the side lengths equivalent to 0.1 meter. Therefore, we can solve for the area for each of the face that's equal to 0.01 square meters. And also, we're given with the electric field 4 times 10 to the power 3, angle 53.1 measured from the positive x-axis to the positive y-axis. So meaning, our electric field is around this direction. So that's measured 53.1 degrees. And since our electric field only has, can be found between the x-axis and the y-axis and then parallel to the xy axis, we can say that our electric field only has the x and the y component. It has no z component. Again, our electric field has only x and y component and has no z component. And the formula that we're going to use for this problem is the dot product of the electric field and the area vector. That would be our flux. So let's start by solving for vector E for us to be able to use in our formula later. So let's solve for vector E. So we know that our vector E at polar form is equal to 4 times 10 to the power of 3, angle 53.1 degrees Newton per column. Okay? So in vector form or unit vector, you can write that as vector E is equivalent to its x component, so meaning that's 4 times 10 to the power of 3, cosine 53.1, unit vector I hat, plus its y component 4 times 10 to the power of 3, cosine, sine 53.1. Sine 53.1. Unit vector j hat. Okay? So our electric field vector in unit vector is equivalent to 2401.68 I hat. Okay? Plus its y component 3198.74 j hat. Okay? So that's the electric field vector in unit vector form. Now let's solve for the flux at S1. So S1 is located at the left side, while S3 is located on the right side. So since our formula is flux is E is equals to the dot product of the electric field and the area vector, so we need to identify the area vector first. So just to remind us, the magnitude of our area is 0.01 square meters. So let's identify the unit vector for the side S1 and side S3. So if we're going to look at side S1 here, so that's on the left side, the unit vector or the area vector is actually directed to the negative y-axis. So parallel to negative y-axis, giving it a unit vector equivalent to negative j hat. Well, on the S3 side, that's on the right side, it's directed towards the positive y-axis, giving it a unit vector equivalent to positive j hat. Okay? So we can say that in this side, the area vector is equals to the magnitude 0.01 j hat, so that's negative. And on this side, that is 0.01 j. So we now have we have calculated already the electric field, and now we have our area vector. So we can now solve for the flux at S1 and S3. So again, it's just the dot product between the electric field and the area vector. So we have here our electric field that's equal to 2401.68 I hat plus 3198.74 j hat times our area vector for S1, that is negative 0.01 j hat. And just a bit of review, when doing dot products, so for the dot product of perpendicular vectors, for example, I hat and j hat, that would result to 0. Same goes with I hat and k hat, that's also 0. And the dot product between j hat and k hat, that's also 0. And for parallel vectors, say for example, you have I hat dot product with I hat, that's actually equal to 1. Same goes with j hat and k hat. So looking at this equation here, so first let's deal with the dot product between 2401.68 I hat and negative 0.01 j hat. So looking at these unit vectors here, we can say that they are perpendicular. So the I hat and the j hat, this would result to 0. And then for the j hats, so we have here, we just need to multiply the magnitudes and we will be able to get the dot product. So let's label this as flux E1. So flux E1 is equal to, we have 31.98.74 times negative 0.01. So that would give us negative 31.9874 volt meter. So that would be our answer for flux E1. Okay, now let's do the same thing with flux E3. So flux E3 is equal to the dot product between 2401.68 I hat plus 3198.74 j hat. So our area vector, that's equal to positive 0.01 j hat. So again, this one would result to 0, and then j hat times j hat, that is 1. So our flux E3 is equal to positive 31.9874 volt meter. Okay, so that's flux at S1 and flux at S3. So we can now proceed with calculating our flux at S2 and S4. So let's first look at again the diagram to get our area vectors. So for S2, that is on the top of the cube, meaning the direction is parallel or directed towards z axis. So we have here, so that's our area vector. So that's 0.01 unit vector k hat. Okay, since it is directed towards the positive z axis. And then on the other hand, at the bottom of the cube, the area vector would be directed towards the negative z axis, giving it 0.01 k hat, which is negative. Okay? So now we can solve for the flux at S2. So let's write that's flux A2. That's equivalent to our electrical vector 2401 point, sorry, 2401.68 I hat plus 3198.74 J hat times the area vector. So for S2, that's 0.01 K hat. So it's very easy to calculate this one because I hat and K hat, that would result to 0, and J hat and K hat, that would also result to 0, meaning our flux at E2 is equal to 0. Okay, that's our answer. And the next for flux E4, that's equal to our area electrical vector 2401.68 I hat plus 31.98, 3198, sorry. So that should be 3198. So 3198.74 J hat multiplied by negative 0.01 K. So then, let me erase that. 0.01 K. Same goes with the S2. Our S4 is also 0. That's 0 because again, I dot K, that's 0. J dot K, that's also 0. So that's our answer for flux E4. Next, let's have our flux at S5 and S6. So let's define our area vectors. So S5 is located at the front towards the positive x-axis, meaning our area vector, sorry, our area vector is directed to the positive x-axis. So meaning that is 0.01 I hat. And for the back, S6, that's towards the negative x-axis, meaning it has a unit vector of 0.01 I hat, but it's negative. Okay, so we can now solve for our flux. So going back, so we'll use the same formula. So flux E5 is equivalent to our electrical vector 2401.68 I hat plus our y component, which is 3198.74 j hat times our unit vector. So for S5, that is 0.01 I hat. Okay, so I and j, so this would result to 0. And then this one would give the magnitude of our flux. So flux E5, so that's equal to 24.0168 volt meter. Okay, so that's our answer. And for S6, we have flux E6 that's equal to 2401.68 I hat plus 3198.74 j hat times our area vector, negative 0.01 I. Okay, so again, this one will result to 0, and then this one would give us the value for our flux. Okay, so we have flux E6 that's equal to negative 24.0168 volt meter. So that would be our answer. Okay. So next is to solve for the total flux. To solve for the total flux, we just need to combine all those individual fluxes. So we have total flux E that's equal to flux E1 plus flux E2 plus flux E3 plus flux E4 plus flux E5 plus flux E6. Okay, so let's plug in the values we have calculated earlier. For flux E1, that is negative 31.9874 J. I'm sorry, there's no direction. Okay, plus our E2, oh, that's 0, plus our E3, so that's going to the right side. So E3, that is positive 31.98, sorry, 9874, plus our E4, that's going down, that's 0, plus our E5 to the front, that is positive 24.0168, plus our, no, sorry, that's minus, sorry. Okay, sir. So minus our S6, which is going to the back, that is minus 24.0168. So our answer, flux, total flux is equals to, if we're going to look at this, E1 and E3 are actually gonna cancel each other, same as E5 and E6, giving us total flux equal to 0. So that's our answer. Okay, so that's how you calculate the flux passing through a surface. Now let's go into Gauss's law. So Gauss's law states that the total electric flux through an enclosed surface, so a surface enclosing a definite volume, is proportional to the total or net electric charge inside the surface. So again, it says here that the electric flux is proportional. Okay, so electric flux is proportional to the charge inside the surface. Okay, so let's consider this diagram. So for a single positive point charge Q enclosed by an imaginary sphere, the magnitude of the electric field at every point of the sphere is given by, so we have this formula from Coulomb's law. Okay, so by the way, mentioned here was an imaginary sphere. Okay, so we call that imaginary sphere as Gaussian. We use the imaginary sphere, and we call this imaginary sphere or imaginary surface as a Gaussian surface. So a Gaussian surface is introduced in a system for us to make our calculations easier because they provide symmetry to the uh, to our electric field. Okay, so going back, so we have here the formula for our electric field. That's equal to 1/4 pi EO times Q over flux. We know flux is equal to E times A. Therefore, we can say that E would be equal to flux over area. Okay, so we can rewrite our E as flux over area. Now, we know that this Gaussian surface is a sphere, meaning the area is equal to 4 pi r squared. So we can rewrite the area as 4 pi r squared. And to simplify, we can cancel out 4 pi and also the r squared, giving us the expression for our Gauss law. Flux is equal to the Q over the permittivity of space. Okay, so that's our Gauss law. So the same number, so if you're going to look at here, so we have a charge enclosed by two Gaussian spheres. And if you're going to look at the number of electric field lines that are being uh, passing through us, electric fields passing through the surface here, if you're going to expand that surface up to the next Gaussian sphere, the number of electric field lines is actually the same. So in the smaller area at the first Gaussian sphere, there's only one electric field line passing through it. The same goes with the surface on the upper Gaussian sphere. So therefore, the same number of field lines and the same flux pass through both of these area elements. Hence, the radius of the Gaussian sphere have no effect on the electric flux. Okay, again, the area or the radius of the Gaussian sphere has no effect on the electric flux. Next, let's look at the Gaussian surfaces for a positive charge and a negative charge. If you have observed, the direction of the electric field lines for the positive charge are going away or directed away from the charge. And for the negative flux, for the negative charge, the electric field lines are going towards the charge. So meaning, if you're going to solve for the flux for a positive charge, let's look at here. So if we're going to look at here, the direction of the electric field line is actually parallel to our surface vector or our area vector, meaning our angle here, phi is equal to 0. If phi equals to 0, meaning our cosine is equals to 0, cosine 0 is equals to 1, meaning the flux here would be positive. And for the negative charge, since the electric field is on the opposite direction of the area vector, the angle is 180 degrees, and cosine 180 degrees is negative 1, meaning the flux for a negative charge is negative. Okay, again, for a positive charge, the flux is positive, and for a negative charge, the flux is negative. And the direction for the positive, the direction of the electric field for the positive charge is going away from the charge, and for the negative charge, it's going towards the charge. So that's the direction of electric field lines in relation to its flux. So in general, Gauss's law states that the total electric flux through a closed surface, which can be written as the surface integral of the component E normal to the surface equal to the constant times the total charge enclosed by the surface. So let's try to evaluate this illustration. So to calculate for the flux through a non-spherical surface, we need to use the surface integral. So you have here the integral sign with the circle in the middle. So what we mean by the surface integral of the area, so let's focus on the surface integral dA. So what this means is that if we're going to have a non-spherical surface, if you're going to put up arbitrary area outside that surface or on the surface and place a electric field line passing through that line, through that surface, you can actually get the flux for that small surface. And if you're going to add all those flux together, you would actually get the total flux around the non-spherical surface. So what it means by this expression here is just we are getting to add all the small parts of those area to provide us with the total surface area of the non-spherical surface. Again, what this expression means that we're going to add all the individual or all the small areas or the differential areas for the non-spherical surface for us to have the total area which we can use to solve for the total flux. Diba? We know from our calculus that the integral sign is just multiple or several additions. So meaning we're going to add small or differential areas to provide us with the total area of the non-spherical surface. So we have here the formula. Flux is equal to E cosine dA. Okay, so let's try to answer practice problem 22.4. It was shown in example 21.10 that the electric field due to an infinite line of charge is perpendicular to the line and its magnitude E equals to lambda. So lambda is the uh, charge per unit length over 2 pi E sub 0 times R. So has an infinite line positive charge running along its axis. The charge per unit length is 4.25 microcoulomb per meter. So first, what is the electric flux through the cylinder through the infinite line of charge? Next, what is the flux through the cylinder if its radius is increased by r, to r equals to 0.575 meters? And what is the flux through the cylinder if its length is increased to L equals to 0.905 meters? So we have this expression here. So let's start by deriving the equation for the flux due to the infinite line of charges. So from our formula, flux E is equals to the surface integral of E cosine P differential A. So since again, what we're doing here is multiplying the magnitude of the electric field to the surface area of the uh, surface, we can say that this expression here is just the area of the cylinder. But which part of the cylinder? So if we're going to look at the diagram here, we can see that our electric field lines coming from this wire here with a constant charge or a uniform charge, the direction of the electric field lines are actually going perpendicular to that line. So that's our electric field lines. If we're going to look at here, since this the flat side of our cylinder, so this side is actually the area vector is actually perpendicular to our electric field. So what does it mean if we have a area vector perpendicular to the electric field? It means that this area here, this one, experiences no flux. Same goes with this one here. So again, there's no flux on the flat side or circular part of the cylinder because it is parallel to the electric field and its area vector is perpendicular to the electric field. So we're only going to consider the area on the curved part of the cylinder since it will make a since the area vector for this um, curved part is always parallel to our electric field vector. So we can say that our flux E is equal to the magnitude E times the area of the lateral area of our cylinder. When we say lateral area, it's the curved part of our cylinder. But because again, we would only take that part because it's always parallel to our electric field vector. So the area vector for that part is always parallel to our electric field vector. Unlike for the flat parts, which area vector are perpendicular to our electric field. So from that, we can say, so since this is a cylinder, we can say that its lateral area is equal to 2 pi RL. So that's 2 pi R, which is the circumference of the circle here, and then multiplied by its length. So that's our, so we have here flux is equals to our electric field times 2 pi R L. Okay, and since you are given the formula for flux, or for electric field, we have lambda over 2 pi EOR times 2 pi RL. We can simplify this by canceling 2 pi and also R. So meaning the formula for the flux is equal to lambda times the length over our epsilon sub naught. Okay, so that's the formula we're going to use to answer these problems. So here's a much clearer version of that solution. So let's start by solving for the electric flux through the cylinder due to this infinite line of charge. So again, formula, flux E is equals to lambda length over epsilon sub naught. So plugging in the values, so flux E is equal to 4.25 times 10 to the power of negative 6. So that's our uh, charge per unit length times 0.5 meters over our permittivity of free space, which is 8.8542 times 10 to the power of negative 12. So that gives us a flux equivalent to 240 times 10 to the power of 3 volt meter. So that would be our answer. Okay, next we have here the electric flux through the cylinder if its radius is increased by R, by 2R equals to 0.575. So again, Let's try to look at our formula. We have here lambda L over epsilon sub naught. So if you're going to look at or analyze the formula, there's actually no variable for radius, meaning the change in the radius would have no effect on the flux on the cylinder. So meaning that would have the same answer as our previous problem. So flux E is equal to 240 times 10 to the power of 3 volt meter. So again, in electric flux, especially when dealing with cylinders, so the radius of the cylinder will not affect the uh, electric flux when there's a uniform charge, line of charge in the center of the axis of the cylinder. Again, the radius does not affect the electric flux. So that will have the same answer as our previous one. So here. Next, electric flux through the cylinder if its length is increased to 0.905 meters. Okay, wait for a while. Okay, so let's have back our formula. So flux is equals to lambda L over epsilon sub naught. So we have flux E is equal to or lambda 4.25 times 10 to the power of negative 6 times our length, which has been increased to 0.905 meters over our permittivity. We have 8.8542 times 10 to the power of negative 19. So that results to 434.398 times 10 to the power of 3 volt meter. So that's our answer. So evaluating the answer from the three questions A, B, and C, we can say that although the radius has no effect on the flux, but when we change the length of the cylinder, we can actually, it actually changes proportional to the flux. You can say that the flux is directly proportional to the length of the cylinder. So here's the clear version. Okay, so that's Gauss's law in general. Now let's talk about the applications of Gauss's law. So in this part of the presentation, we're going to talk about the particular or the specific moments where we can use Gauss's law, or the use of Gauss's law clearly simplifies the problem. So Gauss's law is valid for any distribution of charge and for any closed surface. Gauss's law can be used in two ways. First, we can use it to find the field if we know the charge distribution and there is enough symmetry to let us evaluate in integrals. So take note, there should be symmetry. When we talk about symmetry, it can be spherical symmetry, it can also be cylindrical symmetry, or it can be planar symmetry. Next, we can use Gauss's law if we know that we know the field, and we can use it to find the charge distribution. Okay, in practical problems, we often encounter a situation in which we want to know the electric field caused by a charge distribution on a conductor. So these calculations are aided by the following remarkable fact. So when excess charge is placed on a solid conductor and is at rest, it resides entirely on this surface, not in the interior of the material. So meaning, if you have a uh, conductor in which there's an excess charge, when you say excess charge, these are the charges that have not been neutralized, meaning there's no equivalent negative or positive charge for these particular charges. When that happens, these excess charges actually repulse each other in such a way that each of these charges will be equally distributed at the surface of the conductor. So we call that as the, we call that electrostatic equilibrium. Okay. So first application of Gauss's law is when calculating for the field outside of a uniformly charged sphere. So say for example, you have here a uh, charge with a Gaussian sphere. So our Gaussian sphere is here. So we have three Gaussian spheres. So this one, and this one. So if you want to calculate the electric field at the surface of the conductor. So this one is our conductor, or our charge sphere. If you want to solve for the uh, electric field at this point outside the charge sphere, you can use the formula E equals to Q over 4 pi E sub naught over R squared. So that is derived from the formula for as defined by Gauss' law. And since we know flux is equal to uh, E times A, we can rewrite the formula as this one. So 4 pi r squared is the area for our sphere. That's the surface area for the sphere. And then Q over EO. So simplifying, uh, we can get the electric field outside the charged sphere in the formula E equals to Q over 4 pi EO r squared. Okay. And if we want to solve for the field inside the solid charge, we can actually use this formula. So it was derived. So let us define first the charge density. So since we are dealing with a solid charge, we we know that inside the solid charge, the charge distribution should be equal, meaning all parts of the conductor should have equal number of charges. So the charge density can be defined in coulombs per cubic meter, given by the formula Q over 4 pi R cubed over T. So this one is the formula for the volume of a sphere. Okay, so the charge enclosed by the Gaussian sphere. So we have here charge enclosed, the charge at this purple part, that's equivalent to the density times the 4 pi R cubed over T. So this one is the volume of our purple part inside our spherical insulator or inside our solid charge sphere. That would give us the value for the enclosed charge equivalent to Q over R cubed over capital R cubed. Since our density is given here, we can simplify, so it would cancel out 4 pi. So giving us, it would also cancel out 3. So giving us Q R cubed over capital R cubed. So placing that in our formula, di ba? We know our formula for E. That's Q over 4 pi R squared E sub naught. So instead of writing just Q, we can replace that with the value of our Q enclosed as defined on this part. So now we can cancel R squared at the bottom and then the cube, giving us the formula for electric field inside the solid charge sphere, E equals to QR over 4 pi EO times the capital R cube. Okay, so by the way, the capital R cube is the capital R is the radius of the spherical insulator, measured from the center up to the outside surface. And the small letter r is the distance between the center and then the point inside the insulator where we want to measure the electric field. So let's try an example. So we have here a solid insulating sphere of radius 5 centimeter carries a uniform total charge of 8 microcoulomb. So first, what is the magnitude of the electric field inside the sphere at a distance of 3 centimeter from the center? And B, what is the magnitude of the electric field outside the sphere at a distance 8 centimeter from the center? So the first one is looking for the field inside. the sphere. And the next one, the letter B, is looking for the electric field outside the sphere at certain distances. So for A, that's actually an example for our situation number 2 earlier. So we have the solution here. So from the given, our insulator or our sphere has a radius of 0.05 meters. So that's from the center up to the surface of the sphere. And we want to calculate for the electric field at this point inside the sphere, where the distance from the center is equal to 0.03 meters. And the charge of our sphere is 8 times 10 to the power of negative 6 coulombs. So since we're looking for the field inside the sphere, we're going to use this formula. Okay, so plugging in the values again for R, that is the distance between the point up to the center up to the point of measurement of the field. And then the R at the bottom is the radius of the sphere from the center up to the surface. So plugging in the value, we have the electric field 3 centimeter away from the center is 17.256 times 10 to the power 6 Newton per coulomb. Okay? And for B, we are looking for the electric field outside the surface. So to calculate, so we have this formula. So Q over 4 pi EO R squared. So R, again, is the distance from the center to the point of measurement. So that's outside of the sphere because our sphere is only 5 centimeters, so meaning 8 centimeter from the center, so meaning that's outside of the sphere. And then the radius of the sphere, that's 0.05, and our charge 8 times 10 to the power of negative 6. So plugging in the values to our formula, we get the electric field 8 centimeters away from the center. That's equivalent to 11.234 times 10 to the power of 6 Newton per coulomb. Okay? Next, we can also use Gauss's law to find the electric field of a uniform line charge. Okay? So the charge per unit, let's first define the charge per unit length. So that's charge over length. So that's our lambda. So going back to our formula for electric field in terms of flux, we have here Q over EO. And we know, again, from the previous example earlier, if we have a line of charge, uniform line of charge, the Gaussian sphere that we're going to use will be a cylinder. Pero, when using the cylinder, we're only going to uh, use the area found on the lateral part of the cylinder. We're not going to use these particular areas because, again, the electric field lines, so the field here, they are actually parallel to the surface and then perpendicular to our area vector for that part. Okay, so again, we're only up to the area on the lateral part of the cylinder. And we know that the area for that one is 2 pi RL. So again, we know that flux is also equals to E times A. That is why we have this expression here. And we know earlier from our calculations, we know that the charge for the total charge for the line of charge, that would be equivalent to lambda L. That would be coming from this equation here. So simplifying, we have the formula for the electric field equal to lambda over 2 pi R E sub naught. Okay, so we can solve another problem. So a long straight wire carries a uniform line charge density of 2.0 times 10 to the power negative 6 coulombs per meter. Find the magnitude of the electric field at 0.5 centimeter away from the wire. Assume the wire is infinitely long and the surrounding medium is a vacuum. So to solve, it's a really direct problem. So we just need to input directly our given. So we have the given the radius of our not the radius, the distance between the point of measurement from the line of charge. So that for the line of charge, that is 0.05 meters, and then the charge per unit length, that is 2 times 10 to the power negative 6 coulomb per meter. So placing these values to our formula, that would give us 719 times 10 to the power of 3 Newton per coulomb. Okay, so that's the answer for sample problem number 3. Next, let's try to answer practice problem 22.7p. So a very long uniform line of charge has charge per unit length 4.8 times 10 to the power of negative 6 coulomb per meter and lies along the x-axis. A second long uniform line of charge has charge per unit length negative 2.4 times 10 to the power times 6 to the power of times 10 to the power of negative 6 per meter and is parallel to the x-axis at y equals to 0.4 meters. So what is the net electric field at the following points? Y is equal to 0.2 meters and y is equal to 0.6 meters. So let's illustrate that problem. Okay, so we have here two uniform line of charge. We have lambda 1 and lambda 2. So lambda 1 is located at the origin, while lambda 2 is located 0.4 meters above the origin. So by the way, I use a scale here, meaning the distance between each grid line is equal to 0.2 meters. So giving us the distance from the origin, or lambda 2 is placed at y is equals to 0.4 meters. Okay, so what we are looking for here is the electric field at these 2 points, P1 and P2. And to do that, we need to calculate for the net electric field provided by each of these uniform line of charge. So let's start by calculating the electric field at the point on the y-axis where y is equals to 0.2 meters. Okay, so since we have here a positive and a negative uniformly charged line, so for lambda 1, that is a positive line of charge, meaning the direction of our electric field should be away from that line of charge towards our point 1. Meanwhile, for our lambda 2, which is negative, so for negative charges, the direction of the field line should be towards the source, away from the point. So that is why we have these illustrations of E1 and E2 here. And since our E1 and E2 only has y components, since they are directed towards the positive y-axis, so we can actually add these two y components to get the net electric field. So meaning the total electric field at point 1 is equal to the electric field 1 y component plus the electric field y component of the electric field 2. Okay. So next, we know that our electric field due to line of charges is equal to, so let's write the formula above. So we have E is equals to lambda over 2 pi EO sub naught times R. Okay. So meaning we can write this one as vector E1 is equal to, for our y component of the E1, we can write that as lambda 1 over 2 pi EO R times J hat. So why is it J hat? So if we're going to look at the direction of our field lines, they are actually going up. So meaning both E1 and E2 have unit vectors J hat. And by the way, since we already defined the direction of our vectors, or our electric fields. So there's no need to make use of the negative and the positive. So we can write here absolute value of lambda 1. Same goes with for lambda 2. So absolute value of lambda 2 over 2 pi EO R J hat. Okay, so factoring out our common terms, which is J 2 pi EO. So we have vector E is equal to common terms. You have J hat over 2 pi, the value for our EO, that is 8.8542 times 10 to negative 12, multiplied by our remaining terms. So for the first one, we have lambda 1, that's equivalent to 4.8 times 10 to the power of negative 6 over R. So what's the distance between our line 1 to the point charge? So again, our scale is 0.2. So we can have this one as 0.2. And then for the second line of charge, as so since you already took the absolute value, so there's no need to write for the negative. So we have 2.4 times 10 to the power of negative 6 meters. So over 0.2. So the distance from the line 2 over and T1 is also equal to 0.2. Simplifying, vector E1 would be equal to 647.102 times 10 to the power of 3 Newton per coulomb J hat. And since we are given a unit vector of positive J hat, we can say that our vector E1 is equal to 647.102 times 10 to the power of 3 Newton per coulomb. So upward along the positive y-axis. Along the positive y-axis. Okay, so that's our answer. So meaning, the net electric field at point 1 is equivalent to 647.102 times 10 to the power of 3 newtons per coulomb. So upward along the positive x-axis. Okay, so here's a much cleaner version of that solution. Okay, next, let's talk about the electric field at point 2. Okay, so we're going to do the same process, but if we're going to look at the diagram here, so for the electric field, so let me rewrite the direction of the fields. For the electric field due to the line 1, since it's positive, again, it will be towards the charge. So the direction of the field will be like this. So that's our charge E1. And then for charge E2, since it's negative, it would be towards the line. So like this. So that would be our E2. Okay? And since our E1 is positive or going upwards, so the unit vector is positive J hat. And for the E2, it's going downwards, so the unit vector is negative J. Okay, so again, we already defined our vectors. So for the lambda, we only get the absolute value. So we can solve with the same process. We have E, right? Okay, we have E2 equals to the y components of E1 and E2. So you have E1, 2, sorry. So E1y plus E2y. Okay, so we can get the electric field at point 2. It's equal to Again, the formula for our electric field due to a line of charge, that's the lambda, absolute value of lambda 1, over 2 pi E sub naught R J hat. So again, direction of our E1 is positive since it's going upward. And then for our E2Y, that's minus because again, it's going downward. Absolute value of lambda 2 over 2 pi E sub naught times R J hat. Okay, so factoring the common terms, we can rewrite our equation. So let me adjust the space. So we have here J hat over 2 pi times 8.8542 times 10 to the power negative 12. So that's our PO times times our lambda 1, which is equal to 4.8 times 10 to the power of negative 6 over the distance. So what's the distance here? So we have 0.2, 0.4, 0.6. Okay, so that's 0.6 minus our lambda 2, which is 2.4 times 10 to the power of negative 6 over the distance, that's 0.2. Okay, so answer, that's equal to negative 71,900 Newton per coulomb. Okay, just not forget the unit vector, we have J. Okay, so meaning our E2 is equal to 71,900 Newton per coulomb downward. Okay, along the negative y-axis. Okay, so that's our answer. Okay, so again, the electric field measured at point 2 would be equal to 71,900 Newton per coulomb downward along the negative y-axis. Okay, so the next application for Gauss' law is solving the field of an infinite plane sheet of charge. If you have a plane sheet and you want to calculate the electric field uh, on that sheet, so we have this formula. So let's start by defining the surface charge density. Okay, so again, density, so that's charge over the area. So C per cubic meter. So since this is a plane sheet, so we're not referring to the volume, we're only referring to the area when we're saying about the density. Okay, so from this we can solve for the electric field of the sheet. Okay, so same formula here from the Gauss law, and then you might be wondering why there's 2EA. Okay, so let's try to unpack that one. So since we have a sheet here, so we have here our electric field has this side going here. Then we have also an electric field going here. But they are in opposite direction. Shouldn't it be minus? No, because the flux would not subtract because our area vector here is also to this part, and our area vector here is also to that part, giving both flux on the each side positive. That is why we put 2E8 to include both the flux on the left side and the right side of the sheet. So simplifying, that would give us flux equals electric field equals to the density over 2 pi EO. Okay, let's have an example. So an infinite plane sheet carries a uniform surface charge density of 5.0 times 10 to the power negative 6 coulomb per square meter. What is the magnitude of the electric field produced by the sheet in the region near the sheet? Okay, so we have this solution. Okay, so given density 5 times 10 to the negative 6 coulomb per square meter. So using the formula, so it's very direct formula. So you just need to substitute the value for the density, and then you have now the answer. Electric field is equals to 282.35 times 10 to the power of 3 Newton per coulomb. Okay, next. So here we have the last application for Gauss's law. So the field between oppositely charged conducting plates. So to solve for this one, so it's quite simple actually. So if you measure the flux, the electric field at the center or between these plates, oppositely charged plates. So if you're going to look at the electric field produced by each of these plates, we can see that for charge one, the direction is actually away from the plate. So that's E1 here. And then for the plate 2, which is negative, the direction is towards that plate, making our electric field be the sum of E1 and E2. So we have here the total electric field at the center of between these plates equals to E1 plus E2. And we know that each plate produces an electric field equivalent to the density over 2 pi EO. And then if we add that, we will get this formula. This is assuming that the magnitude of the charge of both of these plates are equal. So otherwise, if the density 1 and density 2 are not equal, so we will consider only this equation. But considering that density 1 and density 2 are equal, so we can use this formula here. Electric field is equals to density over E sub naught. So it's very, uh, the application of this one can be dig deeper in our coming discussion on capacitors. It's because basically these two conducting plates are basically just capacitors. Okay, next, charges on conductors. So we're nearing the end of this presentation, so this would be the last topic, charges on conductors. So let's say you have a solid conductor with no cavity. So when we say no cavity, so it's a solid without any gaps at the center. So the charge Qs at the surface of this conductor resides entirely on the surface of the conductor. So the situation is electrostatic. So the electric field within the conductor is equal to 0. Again, during electrostatic equilibrium, the excess charges resides on the surface of the conductor, meaning inside the conductor, there will be no electric field because each of these excess charges will cancel uh, each of their opposing charge, meaning the conductor will have no electric field inside of it. But if you're going to put an internal cavity, meaning you're going to put a hole inside the conductor, so what will happen is that because the flux is equal to the field at the center is equal to 0 at all points within the conductor, the electric field at all points of the Gaussian surface must be 0. Okay? Again, the electric field at all points of the Gaussian surface must be 0. So it refers to this part. This one is the Gaussian surface. So the E here is equal to 0. So the charge in the outer surface of the cavity, QC, in the Gaussian surface is equal to the negative of the charge Q in the cavity due to the polarization caused by the charge in the cavities. In simple terms, if you have a charge Q here, so that charge, say for example, that's a positive 2 charge with a 2 plus charge, meaning it would actually attract an equivalent value of negative charges. Again, if you have a charge in the cavity equivalent to charge Q, that would actually attract the negative charges of the same magnitude as the charge inside the cavity. And once that happened, those uh, those with the same charge as the charge on the center would actually be repelled towards the surface of the conductor. So that is why we have here the charge at the cavity. So these parts here, charge on this part is actually equal to the negative of the charge at the center of the cavity. So the net charge unit of a conductor with a charge Q in its cavity is equal to the sum of the charge QC in the outer surface of the cavity and the charge QS outer surface of the conductor. So if you know the net charge of the conductor, you can actually solve for the charge at the surface, or even if you want to, if you have the data on the charge at the surface, you can actually solve for the charge at the center of the cavity. Just use this formula. So again, the net charge is equivalent to the surface charge. When we say surface charge, that's the charge outside or on the surface of the conductor, and plus the QC. So QC is the charge on the surface of the cavity. So this one here. Okay, so that would be the net charge of your conductor. So transposing, so you can also troubleshooting. Okay, so we know that QC is equals to negative Q. So we can write QC as negative Q. Or the charge QS in the outer surface of the conductor is given by, so Q net plus Q. Okay, so if you want to solve for the surface charge, you just need to add the surface, the net charge, and the charge at the center of the conductor, or center of the cavity. So let's answer a sample problem. So conductor with a cavity carries a total charge of 7 nanocoulombs within the cavity. Insulated from the conductor is a point charge of negative 5 nanocoulomb. How much charge is on each of the surface, inner and outer of the conductor? So let's illustrate the problem. So we have here the total net charge, or the net charge equivalent to positive 7 nanocoulomb. And we are looking for the charge at the surface and the charge at the cavity, or the surface of the cavity. So to solve for QS, so again, we know that QS is just equal to the net charge plus the charge Q. Okay? So the net charge, we have 7, plus the charge at the center of the cavity, that's negative 5. So meaning the charge at the surface of the conductor is equal to 2 nanocoulombs. So how about the charge at the cavity? So that charge at the cavity, so we know that QC is just equal to negative Q. So since Q is equals to negative 5, meaning our QC is equivalent to positive 5 nanocoulomb. So that's our answer. Okay, so that ends my presentation on Gauss' law. So again, Gauss's law is very useful when dealing with complex distribution of charges.